Maybe you're happy with your job. Maybe it's the most amazing position you've ever had. Maybe you absolutely hate it. What is the thing that would push you over the edge and make you leave it and give up being able to pay bills and groceries, at least for a while? We're going to look at some stories about exactly that. What made you quit your job? Story 1. I'm a lifeguard and should be paid $13.78 an hour, although they made it very clear, in a very obviously furious tone, to only expect 13 because the government thinks it's okay to take such a large amount of money away from the youth they should be serving. Haven't left that place. They take such good care of us, and we come first. Had some visitors try the customer is always right hogwash, and man, I still smile about it. My favorite experience was when I told a parent that her son can't go down the cannonball slide with goggles on. The slide drops a foot down into 12-foot deep water, and I was at the top regulating the two slides. We have this rule because if goggles fall in, we have to turn off the slides and send a guard in. She goes on a rant, furiously stating that there wasn't anything written that said that, and her face when I gestured to my right to a sign that said, on the cannonball slides, please, 1. Listen to the lifeguard, 2. Do not wear goggles or jewelry, 3. Exit immediately. She got even more upset and said that I was being a dumb old bratty teenager and should be fired for mistreatment of paying customers. All the while, I'm still letting people down the slide and checking with the other guards that no one drowned. This enraged her, and she tried to physically turn my body to look at her, saying I was being a selfishly rude and entitled jerk. Calmly, I give a quick double whistle and I said to her, "Congratulations, ma'am. You just ruined this experience for everyone waiting in line." She then said, "Curse you, you absolute dumb old piece of filth." Then proceeded to send her kid right after another. I blow a long whistle to alert the guard below. Forgot to mention the kid was too small anyways, and he reacts immediately as the kid starts to drown. The supervisor came up to me and asked, "Was that you?" And with delight, I shake my head and point to the woman. "Anything else I should know?" the supervisor said, barely keeping a smile off their face. "Not unless you count that they disobeyed the very explicitly mentioned rules of listening to the lifeguard and allowed their kid to go down the slide with goggles on, as well as not properly measuring him and attempted to physically prevent me from doing my job by placing her hands on me rather aggressively." The supervisor's face dropped at that one. Mean parents are one thing, but physically touching the guards without their consent is enough to get you kicked out. The supervisor said, "Officer, could you meet me at Cannonball? We have a situation of potential assault on one of our guards." Another supervisor arrived and the situation was explained. They apologized for what happened to all the other guests and asked them to leave, all the while the woman is flipping out, saying we were detaining her against her will. The officer, yes, a real police officer, arrived, and I recounted the situation whilst the woman is screaming at me, calling me a liar. "Well, I've already requested the video records to be reviewed, so we'll hear back from them soon. In fact, let's head up there now," said the officer. The woman protests, saying that they can't force her to do anything. "Ma'am, I've been told that this is a potential case of assault, and I don't know what ungodly planet you come from, but on Earth, we take that very seriously," he said in such a satisfyingly patronizing voice. The woman begrudgingly agrees, and sure enough, literally everything I said was true. I contact my parents, I was 15 at the time, and they tell me to wait since they were already near the area. They show up later to be told that if required, legal measures can be taken if they felt I was put in a dangerous situation by this woman. I agree not to press charges against her in exchange for $50 in compensation and $50 fine for the water park for violating the terms they accepted when entering. It felt really good walking out of that office. I'm confused. This was a great story, to be sure. But the subject is, what made you quit your job? The way they treat the employees, I wouldn't leave this job either. I wonder why this one showed up. Well, let's keep reading. Maybe we'll find something else. Story 2. Worked for a grocery store in high school. Our store manager was just the biggest shrew to everyone. Really enjoyed my coworkers, so I just ignored her hogwash. Well, one day she was unusually nice to me and asked me to spend the day outside getting shopping carts. Now, usually I was banned from doing this because you could smoke while getting carts. This was in the 90s. And she knew I loved doing it. So needless to say, I was instantly suspicious. Turned out the president and vice president of the company were visiting our store that day. We were the prototype store for a new company plan, which included a hot bar ice cream shop with a dining area for customers in the middle of the store. Well, I decided, forget it. I have to mess with her. During a mandatory water break, as being in Florida, if you don't drink lots of water, the heat will get you. Ran into her and the two guests on the way back out. Shook their hands, had a pleasant conversation with them, and best of all, I called her by her first name, acting like it was her general policy to make us more like family. Let's just say she was the type that made you put emphasis on calling her Ms. last name. Well, the president was extremely happy to hear this, and shortly after made it company policy to have managers go by their first names with employees. So needless to say, her hatred of me went to fever pitch. She couldn't fire me after that, as they insisted I be put into training to be a manager. And while firing me would have been highly suspicious. Well, she tried to frame me from stealing from a till. Now this happened about a few weeks later, and she insisted the cops be called, had me locked in an office to wait for them the whole 9 yards. While worried, I also knew because this was a brand new store that was a company prototype, I knew the camera system was operational. She had gone into my till. I usually was a bagger, but I had also been trained to be a cashier while I was on lunch. She then tried to stash the stolen cash into my locker, but she didn't realize I never used a locker, as I kept my stuff in my car. Well, when the cops arrived, one came in and interviewed me after talking to her. The conversation went something like this. Cop: "Okay, kid, where's the cash?" Me: "No clue. Just got back from lunch." Cop: "Where were you during your lunch?" Me: "I went to Taco Bell," which was on the shopping center property. "Why don't you guys just check the cameras? Likely you'll get to the bottom of this faster that way." Cop: "Look of confusion. They're working?" Me: "Yeah, been online since the store opened. Go talk to the owner." Store owner had an office in the building, as this was to be his home base for several of his stores. Cop: "Okay, I'll do that. Just sit tight." Me: "Yeah, bud, no problem." They take about 15 minutes, then come back in. "Sorry for the confusion, Mr. Loco 440K. After reviewing the video, we found the money and you're free to go." Manager was being handcuffed and placed into the back of a cruiser. See, she thought she had disabled the camera system, but all she did was disable a monitor in the store manager's office. The master system was in the owner's office. So, needless to say, she gets fired, charged with several crimes, and I walked out and never returned. All this because I embarrassed her in front of the president and VP of the company. All right, this was another good tale of revenge, and he did leave this one, but why? It sounds like he liked this job and everybody else except for this person. She just got arrested. Why didn't he stay? He was on track to get a better position. It sounds like he got rid of the only problem that he had with the job. I'm still confused. Story 3. I got a story too. I work at a German restaurant that I used to really love. I loved the food and the atmosphere and felt so happy there. So I decided I wanted to work and thought it would be a great experience. Boy, was I wrong. My boss was super pushy and demanding. We weren't allowed to sit anywhere, not even in the areas designated for employees. And if we did so, we got in trouble. Keep in mind, in this place, you have to walk around, carry and load multiple items, sometimes really heavy, every single day. I also got 12-hour shifts constantly and was just so exhausted. The head chef of the place was nasty to everyone too, except his kids, of course. My boss got on to people for everything, but there was one night where I finally had enough. It was a Friday night, and it started to unravel when the chef made barbecue for the employees for dinner. In this place, you got a free breakfast and dinner. We were all eating when my boss called everyone for a meeting to discuss policy. The head chef was furious and cussed him out on the spot, with my boss muttering, "I was just suggesting." Anyway, we all went for our meeting, which never happened, and the dessert before the meeting was banana pudding. This was my boss's favorite dessert outside of German desserts. So I got asked to cut it and wanted to be nice and give my boss a larger slice. You know how he responds? He yells at me for giving too large of a slice and making a big deal about it in front of everyone. It was so embarrassing. Then I got assigned serving beers, and one of the beers, which I never served, came back because it got to the wrong table. This girl at the bar tells me to check my numbers, and I politely tell her I didn't serve those beers. Her response? To be rude to me, of course. Me, finally having enough, said, and I quote, "Look, I'm not going to check jack for beers I didn't serve." There was this jerkwad who worked at the bar who told me to hush all the time and shut me down whenever I had an opinion. And I told him plainly and meanly, no. The look on his smug face was priceless. Anyways, a few minutes later, my boss comes a few minutes later and asked if I cussed out said employee. And I said, no. Then he says, "Well, 3 people said you did. So if you could be so kind as to clock out and we'll talk about it on Tuesday." I was done. Clocked out and never came back. Never will either. Too long didn't read. Worked at a restaurant I liked. Boss, chef, and employees were jerkwads, got me in trouble, and I left. Finally, we get one that gets to the gist of what we're talking about. How long was he working for this place? The whole thing just seems like an excuse for the higher-ups to just jerk around all the people below them. No respect for anyone. Story 4. When I quit my job, it felt amazing. Now, this only happened a couple months ago, so not too long ago. I started working at a local pizza place in my city because my friend started working there and he said he enjoyed it. After spending about 2/3 of my summer looking for a job, I said, forget it, and decided to apply for there. I applied, and the interview was quick, and I knew I had the job. Anyway, after working there for a month, I basically understood about 95% of what I did, so I was getting cozy with my job. However, a guy named Brad had become the supervisor there, and it seemed like after that, he would pick up on any tiny imperfection that I made. Now, by this point, school had started back up, so I was trying to balance a job and school at the same time. Now, I had started working there in August, and by the middle of September, I was considering quitting. Not only was Brad constantly nagging me and my friend about tiny imperfections, but he only nagged to us, and not a single other person, even if they made bigger mistakes than we did. And there were other things that were building up behind the scenes. Basically, the building was very filthy. There were bugs in the back. Brad was constantly nagging me, and I had recently had a family member fall ill, and me and my father needed to be around to take care of her. So anyway, what happened is that in the second to last week of September, I decided that I was only going to give the place a couple more chances. And long story short, Wednesday of that week was my last day. Now, the main reason for this was because Brad just kept nagging at me all through Tuesday night and Wednesday night. So my friend had also considered quitting, and for the same reasons I was going to quit. But anyway, I went in that Friday, told the manager that I was done, and never went back. And not only did that feel like it took a huge weight off my shoulders, but ever since I worked there for less than 2 months, it almost feels like I never worked there.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 5. This story still itches me. 2 years ago, my neighbor told me that he needed a pharmacist because his last one had a huge fight with his co-owner and friend and quit on the spot. First red flag. My neighbor told me his friend was a little odd, but if I managed to stay away from her, I'd be fine. Second red flag. I went that day to the pharmacy and talked a bit with her like I was applying to a job. She was extremely happy to talk to me and praised every aspect of my persona. I thought, this is weird. Third red flag. First week working there without my neighbor was quite nice, but terribly tiring because that woman was completely useless and forgetful, constantly calling her children, all day screaming, yelling, and being nosy to me and the customers. Many hated her because of her antics. My neighbor came back and told me he wanted to take some days off because he was very tired. He took more than a month. That woman became an obese, nightmarish, yelling control freak. I had some serious trouble with a horrible Karen that loved to blatantly lie, telling me I was abusive to her and I stole some of her money. The owner told me in a very condescending way I had to be more educated to the customers. Even after the fact, she discovered red-handed this Karen. Next day, I tried to avoid any small talk with this stupid owner, but she insisted to be almost in front of me talking nonsense. Then she became an ogre and started yelling at me for every stupid thing she did and blaming me for her utter incompetence. The straw that broke the camel's back was she gave a screaming mouthful in front of one of my customers. That day, I told my neighbor I quit. I can't stand that crazy shrew. But this is not the end. Every time I had to go to the bakery, I had the bad luck to find her buying something. She acts like nothing happened, trying to hug me or kiss me like I was her most beloved friend, and telling me how she misses my jokes and terribly derogating puns at her. That woman is nuts, and I hate her. Story 6. I quit from a bank that I worked at after 1 month of getting hired. I was going through a lot of stuff at the time, like family issues and doing college work. I was practically getting no sleep since it was a full-time job and having to help take care of several kids at home. I quit because the person who was supposed to train me took a week-long vacation out of nowhere. The bank manager didn't teach me anything and expected me to know everything. But aside from having no training, she told me that I should quit after I got something wrong. This went on for about a week, and I was forced to apologize to a customer that I messed up on and had to drive to that person's job and give them $20 because it was the manager's friend. I was bullied, belittled, tired, and had way too much on my plate with little to no sleep. Worst part was that I was only making an extra $200 more every 2 weeks than what I was making at my last job, hooray for taxes, while working 10 hours more per week. I quit after she told me that she would reduce my hours and blacklist me if I made another mistake. That moment, I quit, and she yelled at me to get out or she would call the cops if I didn't close out my cash drawer properly. I hated her and I hated my job. It sounds like this boss had some kind of power trip. Do you think she realized this person had no training? Do you think she cared? Did she really expect this person to know everything without training? And also, why yell in front of a customer? What does that prove to anyone? I don't think that does anybody in the middle of a business transaction any good. If I was at a business and the boss started yelling at the person serving me, whether that person was in the wrong or not, I'd kind of think less of the business. It gives me a glimpse into how they treat their employees. Story 7. I was in a job interview for a comic book shop. The manager was impressed by my extensive understanding of comic books, role-playing games, and card games. I could see that the interview was going great, and the manager and other staff were happy to say I was hired. Then, when they were telling me about the 15% employee discount and that I could read all the comics I want during slow times as long as no comics get damaged, it sounded nice. Then, I asked them how much an hour I would be paid. The owner told me, "Well, at first, you won't be paid, but you get an awesome 15% off employee discount." I silently stared in disbelief as I thought about this before replying, "Okay, when would I start to get a paycheck?" Soon, the store full of employees, who I'm assuming were all of his friends, began asking, "Hey, yeah, when will we start to make paychecks?" The owner kept trying to sell me on how awesome the discount was, and I'm like, I got bills to pay. I can't work for free. I politely told him I refused his job and told him if he could make enough later to actually pay employees, I may reapply. As I left, I heard all the other managers talking with the owner saying, "You have no idea how long it will be till you could afford to pay us, boss?" The store rapidly was bought out by someone else. Story 8. I quit on the spot from a movie theater after they told me to pick the green mold spots off the hot dog buns. I did at first, mortified at the prospect of selling a hot dog to a customer. A few hours later, a guy orders a hot dog, and I told him, You don't want that. He ended up just ordering some popcorn, and the manager walked over and asked if she could speak to me in the back. She began to berate me for not selling that moldy hot dog, and I just snapped. I began to just walk out as she followed me and kept berating me. When I turned around and started yelling about how disgusting this place and she was for daring to serve moldy buns and God knows how many days-old hot dogs to customers. I turned around to see the guy who tried to order the hot dog waiting for his girlfriend by the bathroom and heard the whole ordeal. He looked at me and said thank you for not serving him a moldy hot dog. And his father worked as a health inspector. A few days later, I get a call from one of my old coworkers, and they said a health inspector came in and shut the whole concession stand down and that the manager was fired. I lost my job, but kept my integrity, so I considered that a fair trade in my book. Story 9. My last job, I quit because of many reasons. I was the head to 2 different departments and only got paid for one. My coworkers and even my boss bullied me. And one time, I saw a mouse that got into the rat poison. I'm a huge animal lover, so this hurt me pretty badly. I gently picked it up, and my coworkers made fun of me for it. My boss saw, and she said to take it outside and put it out of its misery, or I was fired. I did the deed, and I went to the bathroom and cried for like 30 minutes. The final straw was when a coworker told me I was being too slow, and he was just sitting on his butt doing nothing. I walked into the boss's office and said, I quit. They told me I was an awful person for not giving them a notice and told me I will never grow up with that attitude. Couple months go by, and I learned the company was so understaffed it had to close down. I wish I was there to see them shut it down. Would have brought popcorn. Couldn't have happened to a better place. Tell me this place didn't serve food. Please tell me this place didn't serve food. Any reason for there to be vermin in the workplace is bad enough. It would be entirely awful if there were food there as well. Story 10. I quit my job at a company's IT department when the entire team told me they were quitting that very day, all at the same time, along with my boss. The company had financial issues for a long time, and they constantly delayed our pay or paid us in parts, and we all knew it was a sinking ship. Sometime later, I got an offer to join a new company they started, which was literally the same thing but with a different name. It was even owned by the same mother company. I didn't take their offer. It was the best decision of my life, since I later learned the company wanted to illegally transfer PC hardware and software from their old company, which was in the process of being liquidated, to the new one, and they needed a scapegoat and blame someone for the missing stuff. And a young, clueless guy with little over 1 year of basic IT support experience was the perfect candidate. Story 11. In high school, I worked at a fast food restaurant. We'll call it McDonald's. On my second day, I went to get fresh hamburger buns and found that a mouse or rat had chewed its way into the bag and had fed off some of the buns, and there were droppings all throughout the bag. My manager caught me throwing them out, and I was told to dust them off and put them out. I said no, and my manager told me to do it or I was fired. I told her I quit. She told me I can't quit because I was fired. I walked and called the health department when I got home. They were shut down for numerous violations. Story 12. I remember when I worked at the Dollar General and ended up quitting on the spot because another girl claimed I had said something harassing to her in nature. I responded that I hadn't even seen her since I first walked in, and I had been with my partner all day working on shelves. She said she was going to transfer me to another store anyways, and I said no, she wasn't, 'cause I quit, handed my badge to the cashier, and walked out. My entire experience of working there was terrible, and that was the last straw.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.